Did you get to find out who was the patient zero? I mean, when did it all start? Who started this?
Well, this all goes back to Kinsey in the 40s, and I don't know if you've met
Alfred Kinsey?
Yeah, done much on Alfred Kinsey. And I'm not the expert on Kinsey, but I actually knew Dr. Reisman fairly well, and she's done amazing work. So Kinsey, who was not a doctor, who was a zoologist, who wrote the books on human sexuality in the 40s, and then really took off as being the basis, his studies for, which was it was all made into a movie as well, with really well-known actress. Anyway, the Kinsey thing, somewhat recently. Laura Linney, she's in it. She starred in it. So Kinsey, so his research, again, zoologist who was a pedophile, his research was used in changing laws across the country and shifted the thinking, because he came to the conclusion, and everyone thought he was a scientist, that we are sexual from birth and that we need to embrace it. And don't want to do a whole Kinsey show here, but that he's very infamous for having the table 34, which was a table, and you can Google table 34, and it shows that, I think it's at 3 months, an infant having an orgasm.
Correct.
Yeah. So there was a woman, she's since passed, Dr. Judith Reisman, who thought,
how did he know that?
Yeah, you should go Google her on some of the like Phil Donahue shows. I mean, she was ahead of her time. Wonderful Jewish lady whose daughter had been sexually abused. And she started exposing Kinsey. And that's what started changing all these laws. So that brings us to how these, what a lot of people don't know, and they see people reading these books and, oh, they're not in my school, or how did they get in there? When obscenity laws were passed that said certain behavior and exposure to children, certain things are harmful to minors, and certain obscenity is harmful to minors. And when those laws were passed in the 70s, it just depends, legislatures went in and exempt public schools, public libraries, and universities from obscenity. So what if I were to give to my neighbor kid, or depending on what state you live in, there would be a law against something that I expose a minor child to that is considered harmful and could be either a felony or a misdemeanor, depending on what it is and where you live, is perfectly fine in the school. So that's where it starts, with the obscenity exemption, and saying that obscene materials are fine in the educational purposes is a fine defense for having this stuff in the schools and exposing kids. So we've approved those. And I would love to say that I would love to see legislatures overturn obscenity laws, but everywhere where we've tried it, we've just come up against the American Library Association. Not that we're going to stop trying, but it's been very, very difficult to even get Republicans, because the librarians come in and play, oh, you don't want to put a librarian in jail. Well, if you're pushing porn on them, yeah, I don't have a problem with it if you picked that book and you're pushing it. But you've got weak-kneed Republicans in red states, just like we have in California. So you've got obscenity laws. But then there was a case, I want to say early 80s, and it dealt specifically, it's very narrow, and I refer to it as PICO, and it's often referred to as PICO. It's a case that deals specifically with who and how books can be removed from a public school library. I mean, it's very specific to that. It's not about what you purchase. It's not about any of that, but it's how you can get things removed. So it was a Supreme Court case, so it really doesn't matter what states say when it comes to this, because they're not higher than the U.S. Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court case, which was a plurality, and I'm not a lawyer, I play one at work, but it's often been referred to by the lower court courts as binding, and what it said, and this is what we're very much why we built Take Back the Classroom, and we've got materials and resources for parents and community members on there. It said a couple of things. It said you can't remove something because of political ideology, political viewpoint. Okay. So in California, that might be different than Alabama. Again, depending on what some of your non-discrimination laws are. But something like genderqueer can be removed, not because it's political ideology, but because it's got graphic blowjob scenes that are pervasively vulgar. I don't care if it's a boy on boy, girl on girl, boy on girl. I mean, it's pervasively vulgar. So they don't get a free pass if they have a political viewpoint. But that is where that First Amendment line is drawn. And so pervasively vulgar and educationally unsuitable are the two terms that the court came out with, that you can remove things that are pervasively vulgar or, not and, or educationally unsuitable, which all of these would fall under educationally unsuitable to the common person. So that's what people need to be writing their book challenges. And so everywhere across the country has a challenge process, because that PICO case said the authority to remove these books is with the administration and the school board, not the librarian, the administration and the school board. And so they have the power. They need to be setting the policies about how to get rid of these books. And so what happened is the American Library Association, along with all the different school board associations, came out with a policy that makes it very difficult for parents to get books removed. And so we have a model policy on our website that Chino Valley Unified has passed that policy, and I think Redlands just had a similar one, where it makes it easier and it kind of cuts out the middleman. So here's traditionally what the American Library Association policy says. It says only a parent can challenge a book, and some go as far as saying a parent in that school, not even just the district, can challenge a book. And then the librarian will decide. And if they talk to the parent still wants the book, and again, they will use the word banned, and I would say removed, because it's sexually inappropriate for minors. They then put together a committee. They're in charge of the committee that's going to read the book. It's a committee made up of the same people that think this stuff is already okay for our kids. And after some sort of 1 month, 3 month, 4 month process that's in secret, they come back to the parent. By this time, the parent's name has been leaked, and everyone is saying, oh, your mom's a book banner. Your mom hates gay. You know, that has gone on while this committee is meeting. And then they come back and they say, well, the book has literary value. The rape scene is germane to the story.
If you remove it, the book is like done.
Well, yeah, if it's got literary value. Well, okay, it may or may not. That still, there's no reason to expose rape kids' minds.
Correct.
Minors' minds. I don't care how much value it has, literal. I mean, you've got other books. So it'll come back, and then you can go through the appeal process, taking it to the school board. But keep in mind, you've already been labeled a book banner. Even your friends are like, really? You hate, which is why I recommend not. This should be one of the last books you challenge. You should challenge the other books. Build credibility in your community to win, because even genderqueer, people hear and see that, they have no idea. But they don't, even well-meaning Christians or lawmakers are like, I don't want to touch it. But if you have built some credibility with all of this graphic material, and you come back and say, no, it has nothing to do with being genderqueer. It has to do with being pervasively vulgar. And you can then get that book removed. But if that's the first book you challenge, you're labeled as hating gays, and it's hard to then flip the script and get your message out.
Do those parents get smeared and harassed?
Oh, absolutely, all over the country. Yeah, and well, really bad. I mean, to where you've got. We've got it going on in Huntington Beach right now, where they're getting smeared over the Huntington Beach City Council. I'm going to be there this coming Tuesday. City Council passed where the books in the public library that are all of these have been removed and put into the adult section, not removed from the library.
Just the section
just put into the adult section, and requires parental permission, and the ACLU and the American Library Association came in, gathered signatures, and it's going to be a ballot referendum to overturn it in Huntington Beach. Huntington Beach is one of the safest cities
Correct.
in America. Their city council passed this. They flipped their city council. I mean, they got one of the books that one of the new city council members was running on was the whole the big bathhouse in the little kids section where you sit down and open up that book. And the city council member was defending it, saying, I'd read this to my 4-year-old anytime. And he flipped the seat and he took that guy's seat, Chad Williams did. And so, again, the ACLU has come in, so that's going to be ground zero to really, and what they're doing is, they've just gone after that city council as book banning, and you hate gays, and you hate... No, I don't want the big bathhouse. I don't want my 4-year-old or 3-year-old, when I take them to the library, to open it up and start seeing that, not even knowing what it's implanting in their head.
But it's not about even our kids. I don't want my
Right.
neighbor 4-year-old to get those
Exactly.
books.
Exactly. And kudos to the city council for doing what they did. And now we've got to rally behind them to push back and say, no, this is not okay to have kids exposed to this in our public libraries. Just because obscenity is legal doesn't mean we should have it. And there are things, and I expect our elected officials, whether it's our city council or our school board members, to do something to protect our kids' innocence. And that's, for me, as a Christian, there's lots that bothers me, and what I might be upset about in my local community would maybe be different than what I do running a public policy group. But when it's sexualizing kids and the Overton window meets our tax dollars doing it, we have an obligation to do something about it. And so that's what I'm just passionate about for this next decade, is to help parents, community members, grandparents get these books legally and effectively removed, and again, spreading the word and stopping the taxpayer dollars. I remember I was at a school board meeting, Chino, after they passed the policy, nothing I was doing. Teachers were there fighting for a raise, and apparently I was pointed out to the LA Times, and he came over and he's like, this is also on my Instagram, he's like, so, you know, you wanted to ban books and you're the one that wrote this policy and blah, 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 blah. And so...
Ben, you mean you can't, it means you can't even buy it. You can't even have it in your purse.
Right. So I said to him, and I need to come up with a few more lines, but I had just testified in Tennessee over a book that was in a high school in Tennessee, and it's in schools throughout California too, by Heather Corinna, called Sex, the Preteen, whatever. It's a big yellow book. You've probably seen it online. We've got it on our Instagram. And it talks about butt fucking and anal sex. I know. So when the LA Times said, you know, you want to ban books, I said, well, here's what I don't know what you're talking about, but what I'm talking about is getting rid of pervasively vulgar books for minors. Books like talking about butt fucking, and he did what you did. And you need to do that, because that's what I'm talking about. I don't know what you're talking about, because I'm not trying to get rid of Charlotte's Web.
Yeah, they have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah, or some book that has a sentence with the word masturbation in it. That's not what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. And he didn't know what to say, but I was making my point. That's what I'm talking about. We need to get the message out that is what we're talking about. I am not talking about classic literature, Huck Finn, any of that. I'm talking about these. And our website shows how deep and wide these books are. And we don't even cover everything. This is phase 1 of our website. We have plans for phase 2 and phase 3. This is just phase 1. And as we're launching, and we just launched a few months ago, there's still some things we need to get up that are with the books there, but we have a whole nother list of books that have been brought to us that I have looked and said, yep, that needs to be on the website. And so in our second phase, those will be added. So this is by no means the most comprehensive list. This is just where we've gotten so far, and we want to get them all up there. And I want to say to your viewers that if it's not listed on our site, it does not mean that there's not pornographic books in that school. It just means we haven't been able to get it up on our website yet. Again, this is a huge task to cover 50 states. There are 13,000 school districts. And our first review of books was about 327, I want to say. So to continue to search those 327 in every single school district is huge. And then we're going to branch out to, our second set of books.
How big is your team? A lot of volunteers?
A lot of volunteers. We have a very small team with a lot of volunteers, and our staff pretty
God
much
bless you.
Working full-time on this. But as I said, God just really laid it on my heart during COVID that our kids are being sexualized. And yes, in the transgender and all of that, that'll be in phase 2 or 3, where it's just the transgender propaganda, which is not necessarily pervasively vulgar, but there are so many out there in these schools pushing the transgender agenda. Parents are bad. Teachers and trusted adults are good.